with the head of retail and private wealth of Sinarmas Sekuritas, Pak Arief Maulana. Hi, Pak Arief. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, Pak. As we know, the IDX has dropped by over 400 points since its last value before Eid, down by nearly 10% since its last all-time record high. Can you explain to our viewers what is causing this drop in the IDX? What are some of the biggest factors, Pak?
Well, as we know, recent move by the Fed on taming inflation in the U.S. by raising Fed rate by 50 basis points is the main factors to cause of volatility for the short term in the global market, including the emerging market as Indonesian as well. And it has changed the global economic outlook perspective on inflationary pressures, worries causing temporary rebalancing or risk-stress asset as equity, thus impacting global equity market as a whole, including Indonesia, for normalizations, corrections, and temporary pullback within the equity market.
All right. Now, before we go into the Fed and sort of capital outflow and all those factors, I want to ask you, do you think that the drop in the Indonesian stock market will last for a sustained period of time? Because it's dropped quite a bit in the last 2 days.
Well, after the Lebaran holiday, we are expecting much more worse than this, but eventually it's not so bad. I mean, like 5%, not less than 5% within 1 day on Monday, and Tuesday we see today market hit maybe around -3% and bounce back relatively -1. So eventually we see that this is a temporary short-term pullback, and we are seeing that eventually investor will come to its sense at the end.
All right, so you're saying it's a short-term pullback. Do you see it rebounding sometime this week, though?
Well, we are seeing May is always historically giving a really bad result for historically, but we are seeing that this is caused by the global pressure. We are seeing good results for the macroeconomic for Indonesian GDP last week, above 5%. This is way much more higher than we expected before in the first quarter of the 2022. So at the end, macroeconomic side of Indonesia will remain good, and we are expecting that investor will come to its sense. And now is a time for bargain hunting for such big cap stocks in the market.
Okay, so you're saying now is a good time to buy big cap stocks in the Indonesian stock market right now, because as we know, the prices have dropped. It's a good time to buy it right now?
Yeah, eventually, if you're talking about valuation, it comes to a more attractive level compared to last 2 months in the early year for this year. So if you're talking about big cap stock, now it's quite very attractive, and we are seeing that if there is another pullback, it's a really good timing to enter the market, especially for big cap stocks.
Right, so big cap stocks, are you suggesting maybe in the banking sector, or what kind of sectors should investors kind of dive into while stock markets are lower right now in Indonesia?
Although the main factors now is inflation, but we are saying that banking will will prevail, as we see all the good result in the first quarter and the second quarter for their revenue stream is quite better compared to the early 2 years before the COVID era. So we are seeing this stock will remain a good pricing in terms of how the investor look at the valuations.
Okay, so banking stocks is something to get into right now, especially stock markets are dropping. That's what you're saying.
Well, if you believe on the fundamental values and believe in terms of how we see stocks moving, now is a good time to seeing all these big cap, especially in the financial sectors.
Okay, now we want to move on to the technology sector, because as we know, it dropped the most today in the Indonesian Composite Index. It also dropped the most on Monday as well. Now, tech stocks also plunged in the US, in Hong Kong, in China, in many markets around the world. So do you see tech stocks continuing to drop in the days to come? And can you provide our viewers with a bit of background as to why tech stocks are dropping not only in some markets, but globally?
Well, some might say tech sector is one of the most overvalued sectors. Over the past few weeks, stocks have sold off as investor incorporate flowing dynamics into their projections. the fear of slower economic growth rate due to factors like inflation and geopolitical reasons could hamper consumer spending, thus lower margin expectation for tech companies. This could impact on company revenue projection and eventually hit tech stock price. And especially for Indonesia, it's a quite relatively unique market. Recent IPO for recent big tech companies in the market will give short-term liquidity. But at the end, well, if you believe in the fundamental, nevertheless, fundamental factors will come to investor sense by the end, and revenue stream will be the main key in terms of the longer prospecting growth tech stocks in the long run.
All right. So, in your opinion, is it time to get out of tech stocks right now in Indonesia? Do you see it dropping even further?
Tech stocks in Indonesia are relatively smaller size compared to its region. So we haven't seen any good fundamentals in terms of tech stocks in Indonesia. And nevertheless, if you're talking about a recent market pullback, you believe that big cap will prevail. So this is the time to see good attractive buying opportunity for the big cap stocks instead of mid to small lower cap stocks.
Okay, big cap stocks should be the focus, in your opinion. All right, so now I want to talk about the bread and butter about the global markets right now. Inflation, higher interest rates. A lot of analysts and government officials in Indonesia said that the Fed raising interest rates will not cause mass capital outflow, but we're seeing quite substantial capital outflow, at least from the Indonesian stock markets. Do you think that this capital outflow will continue in Indonesia, especially from the stock markets?
Well, if you're talking about foreign funds flow, Indonesian market will remain volatile in the short term. Right. But we believe in the longer term, it will coming back positively as most fund manager will do temporary portfolio rebalancings. As proven in the last 2 years, Indonesia will still give positive return on equity investment compared to other OECD countries. So yes, short term is going to be more volatile in the month of May, but at the end, we'll still give you a really better return compared to other region in the market for Indonesian equities.
All right, it's still better than other markets, but as we know, fears of inflation and the Fed is planning more rate hikes. So, I mean, capital outflow is something that could be on the horizon maybe, or do you think that is not the case at all?
Well, the key, yes. If you're talking about foreign investor, yes, they are one of the biggest investors in the Indonesian market. But we can see today, if you can see the market bounce back, and mostly Indonesian local domestic investors are pouring their money into the market. So we see this is a quite balanced situation compared to the last 5 or 10 years. We used to have a much worse situation when last time the foreign investors are pouring out their money coming from our equity market. But now Indonesian local domestic is one of the biggest players as well in the market. So I still believe that it is going to be a short-term pullback and will be a bounce back in the near future.
All right, so short-term pullback, you are still optimistic that the Indonesian stock market will still continue its positive performance that it was reaching, prior to the Eid holidays. Pak Arief Maulana, thank you so much for joining us on Jakarta Movers and Shakers and giving us your insights, Pak.